On a gray July morning in 1588, the English Channel filled with sails. 130 Spanish ships moved in a tight, disciplined crescent formation, the largest invasion fleet Europe had ever assembled, carrying an army meant to conquer England, overthrow its queen, and drag the country back into the Catholic fold by force. Within 3 months, roughly half of those ships would be gone, not sunk in the great decisive battle everyone expected. Most of them wrecked on rocks, torn apart by storms, their crews dead not from English cannons, but from starvation, disease, and the freezing waters off Scotland and Ireland. This is the story of how the most powerful navy on earth set out to conquer a smaller, weaker rival, and lost almost everything without ever losing the war at sea in a single decisive battle. This is how the Spanish Armada failed. By the 1580s, Spain was the most powerful nation in the world. Under King Philip II, it controlled territory across Europe, most of Central and South America, and parts of Asia, funded by an endless flow of silver from its American colonies. England, by comparison, was a mid-sized island kingdom with a fraction of Spain's wealth and military strength. But England had a problem Philip couldn't ignore. Queen Elizabeth I had turned England firmly Protestant, breaking decisively from Catholic Europe. English privateers, sailors operating with the Queen's unofficial blessing, had spent years raiding Spanish treasure ships and colonial ports, stealing enormous quantities of silver and gold on their way back from the Americas. And England had been quietly supporting Protestant rebels in the Spanish-controlled Netherlands, a rebellion that was bleeding Spain's treasury and patience simultaneously. Philip decided enough was enough. He would invade England, remove Elizabeth, and install a Catholic monarch loyal to Spain. It was an enormous undertaking, and from the very beginning it was plagued by problems that had nothing to do with English resistance at all. The original commander chosen to lead the invasion was the Marquis of Santa Cruz, one of Spain's most experienced and capable naval commanders, and a man who had spent years pushing Philip toward exactly this kind of attack. Then, in February 1588, just months before the planned invasion, Santa Cruz suddenly died. Philip replaced him with the Duke of Medina Sidonia, a competent nobleman and administrator with essentially no naval combat experience. Medina Sidonia reportedly wrote to Philip directly, admitting he felt unqualified for the role and asking to be excused from command. Philip refused the request. The fleet that would decide the fate of two nations was now being led by a man who openly doubted his own ability to do the job. The plan itself was also dangerously complicated. The Armada wasn't simply meant to sail to England and land an invasion force directly. Instead, it was ordered to sail up the English Channel, rendezvous with a separate Spanish army stationed in the Netherlands under the Duke of Parma, and then escort that army across the Channel to invade England. This meant the entire operation depended on two separate forces, one at sea and one on land, coordinating perfectly across hundreds of miles with no reliable, fast method of communication between them. If either half failed to be in the right place at the right time, the entire plan would collapse. There was one more problem, and it might have been the most dangerous of all. The year before the invasion was launched, the English privateer Francis Drake had staged an audacious raid on the Spanish port of Cadiz, burning ships, destroying supplies, and delaying the entire invasion by nearly a year. That delay came at a brutal cost. When the Armada finally set sail in 1588, much of its food and drinking water had been sitting in poor quality wooden barrels for months, silently spoiling before the fleet had even left Spanish waters. On July 19, 1588, English lookouts spotted the Armada off the coast of Cornwall. According to legend, Sir Francis Drake, informed of the sighting while playing a game of bowls, calmly insisted on finishing his game before heading to his ship. Whether the story is entirely true or not, it captures something real about the English mood, confident, unhurried, and ready. What followed was not the single decisive naval battle either side expected. For nearly a week, the English fleet shadowed the Spanish formation up the length of the Channel, engaging in running skirmishes designed deliberately to avoid direct confrontation. The Spanish ships were built for boarding actions, getting close enough to grapple an enemy vessel and send soldiers across to fight hand to hand. The English refused to let that happen. Their ships, redesigned over the previous decade under naval commanders like John Hawkins, were faster, more maneuverable, and built specifically to fight at a distance, firing repeated broadsides of cannon fire while staying just outside the range where Spanish boarding parties could ever reach them. The Armada's tight, disciplined crescent formation, its greatest defensive strength, proved almost impossible for the English to break during these running battles. Ship after ship exchanged fire without either side inflicting decisive damage. But the pressure was working. The Spanish were being harassed constantly, denied rest, and slowly pushed exactly where the English wanted them. On August 6th, the Armada anchored in an exposed position off the French port of Calais, waiting for Parma's army to arrive from the Netherlands so the two forces could finally combine and cross to England together. It was, without either side fully realizing it yet, the single most dangerous moment of the entire campaign for Spain. Just after midnight on August 8th, the English sent 8 ships, deliberately set ablaze and packed with gunpowder and tar, drifting directly into the crowded Spanish anchorage. The Spanish had no time to organize an orderly response. In a panic, captains across the fleet cut their anchor cables rather than risk their ships catching fire, and the tight, disciplined crescent formation that had protected the Armada for over a week scattered into chaos within minutes. At dawn, with the Spanish fleet now hopelessly disorganized and scattered along the coast near the town of Gravelines, the English attacked in full force. Without the protection of their formation, individual Spanish ships were exposed to sustained, close-range English cannon fire for the first time in the entire campaign. It was the most intense fighting of the war, and it was decisive. Though only a handful of Spanish ships were actually sunk in the fighting itself, the Armada's cohesion, and with it any realistic chance of linking up with Parma's army, was permanently shattered. With the wind pushing them northward, and the English fleet blocking any return south through the Channel, Medina Sidonia made the only decision left available to him. The Armada would have to sail all the way around Scotland and Ireland to get home, a journey none of the ships had been provisioned for, through waters none of the pilots knew well. This is where the story turns from military defeat into genuine catastrophe. Across September and October of 1588, the Armada, already weakened by weeks of campaigning and carrying rotting provisions and foul water, was struck by a series of violent Atlantic storms as it attempted to round the Scottish and Irish coastlines. Ships designed largely for Mediterranean waters were simply not built to withstand the sustained fury of the North Atlantic in autumn. At least 24 Spanish vessels were wrecked on the Irish coast alone, driven onto rocks by winds the fleet had no way of escaping. Sailors who survived their ships breaking apart and managed to swim or crawl ashore often found no safety waiting for them. Under a brutal English policy of showing no quarter to Spanish survivors, many were killed on the beaches where they washed up, hunted down by English troops and local lords eager to demonstrate their loyalty to the crown. Meanwhile, aboard the ships that were still afloat, the spoiled food and water that had been a persistent problem since the fleet left Spain became a full-blown killing crisis. Dysentery and scurvy spread rapidly through crews already exhausted from weeks of combat and now trapped at sea for months longer than planned. Of the roughly 130 ships that had sailed from Spain with such overwhelming confidence in July, only about half made it home by the time the last survivors limped into Spanish ports. More than 13,500 Spanish sailors and soldiers never returned. The overwhelming majority of them died not from English cannon fire in battle, but from storms, starvation, disease, and the icy waters of the North Atlantic. England, by contrast, lost not a single ship to enemy action throughout the entire campaign. A small number of English sailors died from disease during the extended period at sea, but the disparity in losses between the two sides was almost beyond comprehension. The most powerful navy in the world had been humbled not primarily by superior enemy firepower, but by a combination of flawed planning, a leadership crisis at the top, spoiled supplies, and finally, weather that no admiral of either nation could have controlled. The defeat of the Spanish Armada became one of the defining moments of Elizabeth I's reign, transformed almost immediately into legend. In propaganda and popular memory alike, it was remembered as a triumphant English victory, secured through skill, courage, and the favor of God against overwhelming odds. The truth was more complicated and in some ways more interesting. England's tactical skill in the Channel and the fireship attack at Calais mattered enormously. But it was the merciless Atlantic storms afterward that turned a strategic setback into a catastrophic campaign-ending disaster for Spain. Philip II, receiving news of the catastrophe, reportedly responded with striking composure, reflecting that he had sent his fleet to fight the English, not the elements. It was a diplomatic way of acknowledging what had actually happened. Spain's plan had very nearly succeeded, undone in the end as much by chance, weather, and its own flawed preparation as by anything the English Navy actually achieved in direct combat. The failure of the Armada did not end the war between England and Spain, which dragged on for years afterward with neither side landing a decisive killing blow. But it shattered the myth of total Spanish naval invincibility, elevated England's standing as a serious maritime power, and became, in English memory, one of the most celebrated victories in the nation's history, even though the sea itself had done far more damage to Spain than any English sailor ever managed to.